I'd like to share my screen and offer a PowerPoint of the talk that I have prepared here for us today. And the title of this talk is Parallel Processes in Our World, a Cause for Spiritual and Social Mobilization. And as you can see the picture, it of course conveys the fact that Nowruz, March 20th, 21st, marks the beginning of divine springtime. And certainly in the Baha'i tradition, we celebrate that as the beginning of the new year. But this is in fact an ancient festival. Ancient cultures have celebrated New Year beginning with the beginning of springtime. However, with each next springtime, and I have had the privilege of being with the Cultural Integration Fellowship for a few years now at this time in the year, with each next springtime, our world is entering more deeply in its very critical historical moment of deepening crisis and deepening opportunities for transformation. And hence the talk today. There are parallel processes that we're living, and they are a cause for all of us to really understand and mobilize our resources, which I am confident people here are doing. But it's also about spreading this news to the wider humanity that is really experiencing the crisis. And so I will share here with you a quote from the Gleanings of Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i dispensation, taught in the mid-19th century, and he was a prisoner for 40 years of his lifetime, very much persecuted, very much tormented, at the same time, exiled from place to place, imprisoned again and again. And at the same time, wherever he was exiled, rapidly a community of followers would grow. And through his exiles, his teachings spread very rapidly around all over the Middle East and all the way to Akka and what is now known as was Palestine and is currently Israel, where he ended up his years in prison. So as a prisoner, he taught, be anxiously concerned with the affairs and the needs of the age you live in. And I would like to read this quote. The all-knowing physician, and that is a reference to the unknowable mystery, the mystery of God, hath his finger on the pulse of mankind. He perceiveth the disease and prescribeth in his unerring wisdom the remedy. Every age hath its own problem, and every soul its particular aspiration. The remedy the world needeth in its present-day afflictions can never be the same as that which a subsequent age may require. Be anxiously concerned with the needs of the age ye live in, and center your deliberations on its exigencies and requirements. That was the mandate that Baha'u'llah gave to his followers, even as a prisoner himself. So with his dispensation, spiritual practice was fundamentally redefined as both a mystical personal practice and also a very active and deliberate social dedication to service, to the transformation of society. And he was very clear that while spiritual principles are universal and have been renewed from age to age, the social remedy for each age is different. And so today we're talking about what is the social remedy for our times as we're all anxiously concerned how best to help humanity to deepen its connection to the mystery and to see its role in the transformation of the world. One of the things that have been happening is more and more people have been awakening to the realities of these times that we're living in and creating intentional communities. And here, I'd like to really start by mentioning Oroville, which, of course, was founded by the mother in 1968. And her intention was to put to action the social and political teachings and goals and aspirations taught by Sri Aurobindo of an autonomous, self-governing city-state embodying integral, intuitive oneness. Of course, India has a long-standing and powerful tradition in creating autonomous self-governing communities. We know that both Gandhi and Tagore established and developed this tradition, and Sri Aurobindo had his own vision of self-governing city-states. And that was at a time when, of course, the majority of humanity was not yet aware of the kind of crises that we're acutely aware of today. So these were far-seeing spiritual masters that were leading the way. Another form of intentional communities is what the Baha'i Community Development Project worldwide is doing in the form of Baha'i training institutes. Unlike these self-governing cities, which have limited populations, the Baha'i community development approach is to take community development out in the world, in every community, in every mix of different populations, cultures, ethnic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, and to invite people into a training institute that cultivates spiritual and social empowerment, and in that way, in fact, generates processes of self-governance in a cross-section of humanity. And you can see some of the documentaries on the baha'i.org website of how this training institute works in different parts of the world, India included. And it's very impressive that in each local community where these institutes take root, which is really all over the world, people are making social changes. They're literally transforming their culture and society. And one of the things that struck me the most was that one of those institutes in India made the decision, the local community made the decision to eliminate completely, to ignore the caste system in India, which was a very profound, very revolutionary decision. So this is yet another example of intentional communities that is really springing up all over the planet at this time in response to being anxiously concerned with the needs of our times, of this day and age. Also, all over the world, people who are in varying degrees spiritually minded, even though may not be religious, are forming eco-villages with this acute awareness that we need to learn how to create ecological civilization, and that we can only do that by working locally with changing our own practices. There are also communities that practice co-housing, so that this, again, is a much more planetarily sustainable way of living. There are all kinds of cooperatives, and you can go to this directory, which I've listed here, so that you can see their spread on the planet. But I would really encourage you to really click. I will, in fact, share this PowerPoint after this program is over, and the organizers are welcome to share it with everybody who has been here today. I encourage you to go to this directory because you will really take heart. The intentional communities are spread literally all over the globe, and it's very heartening to see the map. They are everywhere, no exceptions. So these intentional communities are a response to our collective condition, which has been deteriorating from the time when Baha'u'llah wrote the words I'm going to read now. It has been deteriorating very, very rapidly. So in the mid-19th century, he wrote, "We can well perceive how the whole human race is encompassed with incalculable afflictions. We see it languishing on its bed of sickness, sore tried and disillusioned. They that are intoxicated by self-conceit have interposed themselves between it and the divine and infallible physician. Witness how they have entangled all men, themselves included, in the mesh of their devices. They can neither discover the cause of the disease, nor have they any knowledge of the remedy. They have conceived the straight to be crooked and have imagined their friend an enemy." Friends, I'm sure that as I read these words, you can very well recognize what they're referring to. Even in the mid-19th century, the extremes of poverty and the extreme injustice was already apparent in humanity. And so when Baha'u'llah refers to incalculable afflictions, those were already the conditions of many millions of people. But since then, we are further languishing on a bed of sickness, sore tried and disillusioned, as we now know that according to the statistics of the World Health Organization, the pandemic of anxiety and depression is afflicting younger and younger people, already not even teens, but children in their first decade of life. And suicides among children are increasing. And so there is a loss of faith, a loss of hope. And at the same time, we have more psychology than ever in the past. We have all these at least at first glance, very well-organized global organizations that are trying to address the human condition, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and others. So clearly, in a fundamental way, we are missing the cause of the disease and therefore the knowledge of the remedy on a global scale. And so people are responding to this condition. From a Baha'i perspective, the response involves understanding and helping other people understand that we are living in these dual processes of light and darkness simultaneously unfolding in the world. Because when people understand that these parallel processes are unfolding, then it is easier to not be only focused on the darkness, but to really see the evidences of the light that is spreading and deepening, as I already gave you an example, with all the intentional communities all over the world. The overall process that we're witnessing is a very painstaking shift from a material civilization to a spiritual civilization. Of course, that was the impulse that Baha'u'llah said in the mid-19th century was released. It is the all-pervading spiritual impulse of our time. And he was very clear that that impulse will affect more and more everyone, whether people understand or even are aware of his teachings or not. This impulse will permeate the hearts, the minds, the souls. More and more spiritual teachers will arise, and the transformation will be underway, because he was very clear that he's just a channel from the mystery, but that is the will of the mystery, that which we refer to as the unknowable or God. The will of God for this age is the transition from a material to a spiritual civilization. And I find it very heartening to come upon examples of that in my everyday research and work and interactions with people. One such example that I recently learned of is the City of Joy in the Democratic Republic of Congo. For those of you who like Netflix, you can go on Netflix documentaries and type in City of Joy, and you will find the documentary there. It is a stunning example of how the spirit of one woman has been able to create a refuge for thousands of women who were the victims of violent rape and genocidal policies that are continuing in the Congo, and has been able to not just create a shelter for them, but to actually help these women recover from truly the edge of desperation, rediscover their spirit, rediscover their resilience, and then go out from the city of joy to help other women find their spirit and prevail. It is a powerful example of how the human spirit is awakening even in the midst of the most atrocious circumstances. Of course, for many of us, it is not a secret that the reason the Democratic Republic of Congo is continuing to suffer such violence is because it is very, very rich in particular mineral resources that are very essential to all of our electronic toys that we depend on. And so multiple interests from the Western world are maintaining all kinds of guerrillas there that make it possible for them to mine in places where otherwise there would be villages and people living peaceful lives. So it's another example of both the deep darkness that we're living and which we refer to as civilization, but also to the transformation from darkness to light. Another such example is the Cambodian Somali Mom Foundation, which took on a very comparable task, but in Cambodia. So, in the process of spreading the light, we're working to build from our civilization a true civilization. And here's what Baha'u'llah had to say about civilization. The civilization so often vaunted by the learned exponents of arts and sciences will, if allowed to overleap the bounds of moderation, bring great evil upon men. And we now know that this consumer civilization has made it a priority to uphold the human right in the West, particularly to consume at all cost, plundering resources from all parts of the world, including the Congo. And that this civilization has at the same time espoused as its chief method of inquiry something that many of us now understand to be scientific materialism, or also referred to as scientism. This is a research method that only considers valid that which can be measured, that which can be counted, that which can be controlled. And so this research method has almost entirely excluded the concept of human spirit and free will. And this materialist reductionism has left many people who have high regard for science for good reasons really disillusioned and deprived of any kind of faith. And at the same time, we are reminded again in the Baha'i writings by the son of Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha, in The Secret of Divine Civilization, that the primary purpose in revealing the divine law over the ages is a civilization that is based on the refinement of character. And so if we take that as the standard of civilization, the refinement of character, then we clearly have some serious work to do. So true civilization, some more excerpts from the Baha'i writings on the topic of true civilization, which are particularly important for those of us who have been fasting for the last 17 days. It'll be 19-day fast before it's over, because the purpose of the fast is not just to abstain from food and drink during the daytime from sunrise to sunset, but really to focus on bringing forth our spiritual qualities in a whole new and even more concentrated way than the rest of the year. And here's what Shoghi Effendi has to say. The need is very great everywhere in the world for a true spiritual awareness to pervade and motivate people's lives. We know there are a lot of spiritual groups in the world, a lot of faith traditions, a lot of wisdom traditions, and in many cases, we see them engage in violence with each other. We see people of faith and people of spirit using harsh language, and really not necessarily working for unity. So true spiritual awareness is something we all need. Nobody is exempt. Another quote from Abdul Baha from Paris Talks: man becomes a prisoner when his ultimate desire is no higher than his welfare in this world of the senses. Of course, that speaks directly to the consumer society in which many of us in the West live. And it's not even only in the West. I currently reside now in the former Eastern Europe, where the concept of civilization as a consumer society has penetrated full scale and is every bit as evident as anywhere else in the West. Another selection from Abdul Baha, The Reality of Man. The heart's ambitions should ascend to a more glorious goal. Mental activity should rise to higher levels. And that goes right back to we should be anxiously concerned with the affairs and the needs of humanity. And finally, from Promulgation of Universal Peace, and those are collections of the talks that Abdul Baha gave during his trip to the West, across the United States in 1912. And those are extraordinary talks that were given in churches, synagogues, universities, mosques, wherever he stopped, crowds gathered to hear him. And his talks are collected in this volume. And here he says, it is now time in the history of the world for us to strive and give an impetus to the advancement and development of inner forces. That is really profound, because he was saying that in 1912, at a time when material civilization was gaining momentum and was very much as yet to become the fad of the times. Our fascination with materialist science was only just beginning when he made that comment, that warning, that we should really focus on inner forces. So one of the fundamental spiritual teachings for this age is the need to recognize the dynamic coherence between spiritual and material reality, and to live and organize our affairs in that way, in coherence between spiritual and material reality, which, as we know, is not the way we live currently, not the way what we currently refer to as civilization is organized. The emphasis is almost entirely on material reality. However, there are many, many groups of people who are trying to change that. And I want to share here an example that has recently really inspired me. This is the Scientific and Medical Network, which has existed for 50 years now. And it was founded by medical researchers and physician practitioners who could not find in the medical paradigm in which they were trained, which is entirely materialist, explanations for the spiritual experiences that many of them were having. And so they came together, founded this Scientific and Medical Network of medical research, and they have been offering weekly talks on the new science of life, which is now emerging. And it is a science that really finds coherence between the spiritual and the material. It uses much broader methods of research as it studies our way of being, our way of knowing, as well as our way of acting. And so they seek to really advance the integration of heart and head, not just in human perceptive abilities, but also in research. And they have done a remarkable job of widening our framework for understanding reality and consciousness. So for those of you who have interests in the medical realm, or more broadly in the healing realm, you may want to check out the Scientific and Medical Network. It is based in England, but contributors are from all over the world. Yet another example of the spiritual processes which Baha'u'llah predicted in the mid-19th century is the effort that is now global and rapidly expanding to build the structures of a world that works for all. One such example is this organization that has become known as Mobilizing an Earth Governance Alliance. This is an alliance of alliances. So it's bringing together networks of organizations. And what is it trying to do? It is trying to work with the current structures of governance that we have, namely the United Nations of global governance, to call for a planetary climate emergency. Because we know from the climate scientists that we are in the last decade before irreversible changes. And so now we're in a timeline of between 3 to 7 years. And so the call to the UN is to actually declare a planetary climate emergency. And once that is done, and we have the blueprint of what happened during COVID, although very imperfectly, but once the world recognized a pandemic, a global pandemic, resources were summoned to address it. And so here the goal is to immediately create new entities, and that's a global environmental agency and an international court for the environment. These are non-existent at this time, but these are agencies that would be empowered by the global community to deal with planetary boundaries in the Anthropocene. What does that mean? That basically means that the global governing body of the United Nations will give power to we have some background noise again.
Sorry, I'm trying to find that participant to mute them. I'll mute him when I find him. Sorry.
Thank you. So that really means that that is a very collaborative way to bypass the issue that people are now recognizing that the current structure of the United Nations no longer works, especially the Security Council, that we need a massive restructuring of the UN to address the planetary crisis. And this is a way to do that by simply creating new agencies that will deal with the planetary emergency. Of course, that will also mean that that would require broadening the international security paradigm. And that was something that Baha'u'llah foretold in the mid-19th century. He said that the time will come when collective humanity will recognize that it will need to have a collective force that is able to stop all wars and the rise of dictators and really protect peace on the planet. And it seems that in a context of planetary climate emergency, we may be able to move in that direction. And of course, a thing that many global organizations are calling for now is an alternative to the current General Assembly at the United Nations, which is entirely constituted of state actors who are political appointments, and they come with their own political agendas, not necessarily representing humanity. And the call has been massive across global organizations to create a world parliamentary assembly that directly represents humanity proportionate to the population of each country. So these are staggering proposals. They are very widely spread. Very empowered organizations are working on them. And that is yet another example of the fulfillment of this powerful spiritual prophecy in the mid-19th century, that it is the will of the unknowable for this age that we will transition from a material to a spiritual civilization that attends to all of humanity, fosters and protects unity and oneness, and actually works for all living systems, not just for those with money and power. So another example of creative solutions, I wanted to really give you a lot of hope today because I find it to be so heartening to learn about these things. This is from Jeff Clearwater, the founder of Village Lab, yet another initiative that you may want to check out. And this particular excerpt was published, this actually white paper on the creation of participatory commons was published in 2020. So as you can see, these are all very recent developments which show the parallel processes. We all know about the decline and the deepening of the darkness, but we're seeing how much is happening that is really spreading the light, that people don't necessarily know about, but would really benefit to know about. And so he suggests here that humanity's creativity and intelligence are evolving. And I think we just saw quite a few examples of that just in recent decades. But we're held back by old institutional structures and social, political, and economic conceptions that really prevent us from taking care of the whole planet. And so he notes, and others have noted too, that we are seeing the emergence of participatory commons. So participatory commons are grassroots phenomena, and they have they are a wide range. They can be platforms, they can be internet platforms. An example of that would be Hilo platform, which is structured in such a way that it allows networks of networks to communicate and co-organize together. Pretty remarkable accomplishment of our technological age. They can also be ecosystems. There was a little bit of an echo. There can be organizations that initiate their active stewardship of a specific commons for a wide range of interrelated purposes. They could be organizations that are cross-pollinating their wisdom, their protocols, their platforms and projects. I am aware of multiple such initiatives worldwide. And Jeff Clearwater compares them to how cells interact with the organism they are part of. So we're basically seeing, and that's what this description is referring to, the rise of self-organizing cells all over the planet that are these participatory commons that are networking with each other, and it's a wave of human movements rising. Now, why participatory commons? This is important to understand. One of the reasons why we're in such crisis today is because the forces of the old world, the forces of power and force and greed and darkness, have in fact appropriated much of the global commons. The air, polluting the air, polluting the oceans, polluting the rivers, polluting the soils, destroying forests, cutting down forests, cutting down massive sections of the Amazon tropical forests, which are the lungs of humanity. So there has been literally a stealing of common resources from humanity by people in power, people who are dominating through the power of money. And so the movement of participatory commons is for communities, organizations, and initiatives to reclaim the collective commons and to govern these commons collectively on the ground, which is why, as you can see here in the last paragraph, these participatory commons are of all sizes. Some are small entrepreneurial teams or intentional communities. Some are large platforms that are sharing or integrating even supply chains or stewarding a watershed. There are also mutual aid networks, small business collectives, multi-stakeholder co-ops, joint ventures, and all of them are being modeled by this pattern, participatory commons, sharing the resources, sharing the governance, and properly distributing resources to all who have access, who live on these common resources. And so we expect that we will see new and new patterns of participatory commons emerging. As we now know that humanity is on the rise, light is spreading, and people are discovering new possibilities every single day. Another aspect of innovation. For much of the history of human civilization, people of faith have built their own places of worship. And of course, the planet is interspersed with churches, mosques, synagogues, and many other places of worship. In the Baha'i spiritual tradition, we are enjoined not to build our own churches or places of worship, but to build as much as possible on every continent and as much as possible in every country, a house of worship which is open to and intended for people of each and every faith and spiritual conviction. So these houses of worship are another innovation of the 20th century, really, and they're spreading very rapidly around the world now, that are seeking to fulfill the primary purpose of spiritual teachings. And here I will read to you again from a talk that Abdul Baha gave on April 30th, 1912 in the United States. Actually, he gave this talk in Chicago, where the first Baha'i house of worship and the one in the United States now has been built. And here's what he said. Among the institutes of the holy books is that of the foundation of places of worship. That is to say, an edifice or temple is to be built in order that humanity might find a place of meeting, and this is to be conducive to unity and fellowship among them. The real temple is the very word of God, for to it all humanity must turn. And it is the center of unity for all mankind. It is the collective center, the cause of accord and communion of hearts, the sign of the solidarity of the human race, the source of eternal life. Temples are the symbols of the divine uniting force, so that when the people gather there in the house of God, they may recall the fact that the law has been revealed for them and that the law is to unite them. The original purpose of temples and houses of worship is simply that of unity, places of meeting where various peoples, different races, and souls of every capacity may come together in order that love and agreement should be manifest between them. The differences existing between nations and peoples will soon be annulled, and the fundamentals of the divine religions, which are no other than the oneness and solidarity of the human race, are being established. Then divine policy shall govern the world, for the divine policy is the oneness of humanity. So this is a very rich and very thought-provoking excerpt. In a very gentle but also firm way, he reminds us that the way that humanity has developed these practices of one religion burning down or destroying the temple of another faith, they do not respond to the intent of what a temple is. A temple is there to bring together people of all faiths, to unite the hearts. How? By helping all hearts turn to the Word of God. And the Word of God, the divine teachings, are always about oneness. And so, in this way, he is reminding communities what temples are really about, and Baha'i houses of worship really stand for that all over the planet. There are beautiful houses of worship now on every continent, and in fact, many built in different countries as well. So you can do your own research, just type in Baha'i houses of worship and you will see the most phenomenal architecture, which is always different from place to place. And of course, one of the most famous ones is the house of worship in India. But each house of worship has an architectural design that is in some way connected to the cultural and spiritual traditions of that particular part of the world. So it reflects the diversity of the human family and also the oneness. And of course, that's why the Indian house of Baha'i house of worship is in the form of a lotus, the lotus temple. So I come back here to the fact that Nowruz for us marks the end of the fast and the beginning of the new calendar Baha'i year. Fast, of course, is a practice for most spiritual traditions in the world. And just a reminder of why people of faith fast, and certainly why Baha'is fast in these 19 days. And these are, again, selections from the Baha'i writings. Those souls whose inner being is lit by the love of God are even as spreading rays of light, and they shine out like stars of holiness in a pure and crystalline sky. For true love, real love, is the love of God, and this is sanctified beyond the notions and imaginings of men. And it is indeed reminded to us that as we fast, we are being infinitely fed by the love of God, which is sufficient. And then we are also enjoined in this way. Let God's beloved, each and every one, be the essence of purity, the very life of holiness, so that in every country they may become famed for their sanctity, independence of spirit, and meekness. Let them be cheered by draughts from the eternal cup of love for God, and make merry as they drink from the wine vaults of heaven. Let them behold the blessed beauty and feel the flame and rapture of that meeting, and be struck dumb with awe and wonder. This is the station of the sincere. This is the way of the loyal. This is the brightness that shineth on the faces of those nigh unto God. So during this time of fasting, we have the opportunity to take stock and to really bring ourselves to account more than ever. If we are aware that we have hurt or insulted any soul, we have an opportunity to make amends as we seek for sanctity, independence of spirit, and meekness. And finally, Abdu'l-Baha, also in Promulgation of Universal Peace, describes the cycles of divine springtime. And I'd like to close with this quote. Just as the solar cycle has its 4 seasons, the cycle of the sun of reality, which is the mystery that Kundan opened with a poem devoted to the sun of reality, to the mystery, has its distinct and successive periods. Each brings its vernal season or springtime. When the sun of reality returns to quicken the world of mankind, a divine bounty descends from the heaven of generosity. The realm of thoughts and ideals is set in motion and blessed with new life. Minds are developed, hopes brighten, aspirations become spiritual, the virtues of the human world appear with freshened power of growth, and the image and likeness of God become visible in man. It is the springtime of the inner world. After the spring, summer comes with its fullness and spiritual fruitage. Autumn follows with its withering winds, which chill the soul. The sun seems to be going away, until at last the mantle of winter overspreads, and only faint traces of the effulgence of that divine sun remain. Just as the surface of the material world becomes dark and dreary, the soil dormant, the trees naked and bare, and no beauty or freshness remains to cheer the darkness and desolation, so the winter of the spiritual cycle witnesses the death and disappearance of divine growth and extinction of the light and love of God. So this section refers to a Baha'i spiritual understanding that the mystery, the unknowable mystery of God, has gifted humanity with cycles of spiritual appearances that stand in relation to each other as in progressive revelation. And each next one renews the divine springtime and brings teachings that correspond to the social needs of the age. And it will appear at a time when the previous spiritual cycle is in manifest decline, darkness, and desolation, as we read here. And that's something that we spoke about at the beginning. We're seeing deepening darkness, and at the same time, this new cycle has begun. From a Baha'i perspective, it has begun in the mid-19th century, and it is rapidly gaining momentum across humanity, across spiritual traditions. And so I will continue with the quote here. For a long time, the religious world had been weakened and materialism had advanced. The spiritual forces of life were waning. Moralities were becoming degraded. Composure and peace had vanished from souls. Hatred overshadowed humanity. Bloodshed and violence prevailed. The sun of reality seemed to have gone completely. The season of winter fell upon mankind. But in the generosity of God, a new springtime dawned. The lights of God shone forth. The effulgent sun of reality returned and became manifest. The realm of thoughts and kingdom of hearts became exhilarated. A new spirit of life breathed into the body of the world, and continuous advancement became apparent. In the new springtime, the former springtime has returned. The world is resuscitated, illumined, and attains spirituality. Religion is renewed and reorganized. Hearts are turned to God, the summons of God is heard, and life is again bestowed upon man. Friends, I am sure from this quote you have understood that those are the dual processes I was speaking about today. And because the processes of darkness are so powerful, it is easy for us, the forces of darkness and decline, it is easy for us to become lost in the bushes. That's why I think this wonderful, beautiful animal is a perfect example of the kind of perspective that we need today. This giraffe walks through the bushes, but his elegant, graceful neck is lifted high up above the bushes, as you can see, and its quiet eyes are looking into the distance, discerning what needs to be discerned and orienting itself to it. And so may we too sharpen our discernment of this new spiritual cycle that humanity is in, that is spreading and pervading all human efforts. And may we also become bearers of this wonderful news for all people around us, so that hearts can be empowered, illumined, inspired, encouraged, and light can gain power, spread, and prevail in a world that is seeking to transform itself into a world, for the first time in human history, that actually works for everyone. No one left behind. That's where we're headed. Thank you very much.